The city clerk's amazing. These were both sent out together at the municipal.
Okay, we're on live.
Okay, great. The East Lansing City Council special discussion only meeting of March 16th, 2026. The meeting will come to order. Could we have the roll call, please?
We, Councilmember Whalen,
Here.
Councilmember Singh,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grigsby,
Here.
Mayor Meadow, or Councilmember Meadows. Here and Mayor Altman.
Here. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Grigsby. Second by Whalen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And carries it. We're recording?
Yep, oh yeah,
Great,
sorry.
okay. All right, so agenda item 2 is city council interviews of 2 law firms who responded to the city's labor and employment law services request for proposals. We have allocated a half hour for each of the interviews. We will start with GMH, Gianmarco Mullins and Thornton. We're in the session. Yeah, we're open.
Good.
Oh, there, yeah. I learned so much. And we are joined first by John Clark and David Clark from GMH, and we have all prepared questions. I thought we would start with a 5-minute introduction that you might want to give, highlighting the highlights of the proposal. And anything else that you think we should know as framing for the discussion.
Sure. So again, my name is John Clark, senior partner with Gianmarco Mullins. Been with the firm since 1995, practicing in the labor world for about 30 years. I chair our municipal group, which is 9 lawyers, but we are a 65-person law firm in the city of Troy. We also have an office in Okemos. Labor and employment is my passion. That's what I spend 99% of my time. Megan came aboard on the team as a full-time lawyer in November. She passed the bar, but had been with them for about 1.5 years, and she's already been knee-deep in negotiations and arbitrations and et cetera. In addition to being a 32-year practicing attorney, I also teach a graduate class at the Oakland University, Public Labor Relations. I've done that now for my second go-around. I'm also a certified AAA arbitrator, employment arbitrator, and at any time have between 5 and 8 active arbitration cases where I get to play judge, which is always a fascinating thing to see lawyers and how they operate. You really learn a lot about the profession being on the other side. We have a vast array of clientele. In fact, we were just hired by the city of Troy to handle all their labor relations, and I just signed an agreement with the 54B to handle their labor relations matters. And in fact, we just handled an employment matter, working with Nicole. Really three main reasons why I think you should go with our firm. And I know change is difficult. I understand the dynamics of what's going on now with this circumstance. Number one is the experience. I've handled all facets of labor relations matters, including most notably Public Act 312 arbitrations. And I would encourage you to ask the other law firm about their experience in that realm. That's very important. Not that I ever want to get to a 312. A 312 compulsory arbitration, as you probably know, is where if the public sector side you can't reach an agreement, that it's thrown to an arbitrator who makes that decision. And the other side has to know that you're capable and willing to do that and go there. So experience is huge. And I believe that we hold that experience, and I think that's something that should be given very strong consideration. That folds into the next, which is competitive pricing. Okay, the pricing I think we quoted is $195 for myself, and anything other would be $175. I believe the firm coming in is going to quote you $250. It's a big jump. It's a big jump. And based on my experience, which I think is dwarfs the others, I think that's a steal, quite frankly. And what does that do? It's not just the hourly rate, it's the efficiency that goes along with that experience. The third piece, I know that's always a hot topic, is responsiveness. We are extremely responsive, 24/7 operation, including in terms of tracking. I know, Mayor, that was a big issue with you, is the tracking is now what we've implemented. Is when an assignment comes in, there's an email communication outlining, confirming the assignment. Here's the timetable for a response. And then that automatically is forwarded to my assistant, who then puts those benchmarks or those dates in my calendar with ticklers. They're there. So the responsiveness is there. I was just on vacation for a week with my family, and fortunately I spent some time on the phone and texting. That's the nature of the business. In the employment labor world, things simply don't go away. They don't go to sleep. It can be a very labor intensive, no pun intended, part of the world. So experience, cost competitive, and responsiveness. Also, during our tenure here as general counsel, I was involved with training. I trained the entire DPW staff here. I trained all management staff on things such as harassment, discrimination, things such as counseling, disciplining employees, how to interact with employees, things like the Earned Sick Time Act, HIPAA, all those things were trained through staff. I was involved in reviewing, editing, and approving policies for the city, and I also performed several internal investigations of some very high-level positions, and those were all entrusted to our firm to handle. So I know the landscape, I know the players. I've known Robert for 20 years. He hired me to assist him when he was at the county to do some work on retiree healthcare and whether they can make changes to retiree healthcare. So, and I represent the city of Saginaw, was one of my oldest clients, and still is. So I've known Robert a long time. We have a good working relationship with Emily, the HR director. I worked with her, seemed like almost on a daily basis on things. So I have a working knowledge. I do have your CBAs. I'm familiar with them. I know a lot of these are coming up this year. I noticed in the fire contract that was inked in 2025. So it's almost like perpetual bargaining, which is something that I would try to get us away from. I don't think that's healthy for the labor relations environment. I think that there needs to be some time in between bargaining and labor peace. And that's something that I would consult on and would hopefully push so that we get away from that pattern, because it's time consuming, it's expensive, and it really pulls away from the focus of what these departments need to do, which is to provide public service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For that brief. Questions, Councilmember Singh?
And how are we doing this? Do you want me to go through my list, or are we gonna go one at a time per member?
Why don't we go one, why don't we cycle through?
Okay.
We can defer if we need to. Yes.
I'm gonna ask overarching question, and then I have additional, more specific questions later, but why do you want to work for the city of East Lansing?
Because I enjoyed the time that I was here. I really enjoyed it. I went to Michigan State. Like I went to Michigan State with both Michigan State grads. It was really a dream when we were selected to be general counsel. That was something that I didn't expect, that they would hire a firm out of Troy. And that it was a good relationship. I enjoyed the time that we were here. I enjoyed working with both of you. This is like a second home to me. We have an office here. And I just really like the people. And that's probably the most important part of why I want to work here. It's a good opportunity, and you've got a good staff. It's just a good working environment. And that's why I've been persistent in pursuing this.
Yeah.
You know, I've been very persistent because it's something that I want.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, this is my first go around. So
Sure.
bear with me.
Of course.
So, you know, as a newer member of council, I'm just trying to get a little bit better insight about the process and how the work is done. So my question is, city council often has different perspectives with public safety policy, particularly when there's police issues, accountabilities in question. From your experience, what guidance do you typically provide to ensure those debates remain productive while also protecting the city from legal exposure? I ask this because, you know, we have these strong differences, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to understand where we stand within law and fully engaging with the community in a positive way.
So I think that information should be provided to all members of council. I'm a big proponent of that. I think that's important. One effective tool, and I see you have one tonight as a closed session. So let's say that we were to embark on collective bargaining. People say, what's your philosophy? My philosophy is, what are the goals and aspirations of the city? What do you want to accomplish in collective bargaining, right? Is it saving money? Is it attracting and retaining great staff? Is it cost cutting? Is it pension and OPEB? You know, what are the goals and aspirations of council? And then from there, we craft a strategy in order to ensure that we can achieve that goal. And the best way to do that is to have collective discussions. You may have a different point of view than the mayor may have in terms of what's more important. Is it retaining? Is it cost cutting? Is it growing the department? Is it getting into other services? And we have those collective discussions. At that point, hopefully there's some general meeting of the mind. Not that everyone's going to agree on everything, right? But at least there can be some general meeting of the minds as to what's the best way to proceed through collective bargaining so that we achieve those goals. But the understanding that we're only half the equation, right? The union is the other half, and certainly they have to have buy-in. But because of my relationships with a lot of these business agents, I know a lot of them a long time, there's a good trust factor there. And I believe that carries a lot of weight in terms of bargaining and dealing with, because there is good faith and there is a good working relationship.
Thank you.
What's your process for tracking legal and other developments outside the city that might be relevant to our labor issues and communicating those developments to us?
Yeah, so we have certainly Megan, as a newer lawyer, has been tasked with legislative and court analysis. So she does a semi-weekly or a semi-quarterly deep dive into those legislation and court cases to see what's there. We're also members of the Michigan Bar Labor and Employment section, so we get quarterly updates. Members of the MML, MTA provide updates through my relationship with Oakland University and the teaching that I do. There's another avenue. And so when things come in, we're able to digest it and provide information. I'll give you a great example. And this came about in latter half of last year. We started talking about the big, beautiful bill and no tax on overtime.
Mm.
And everyone thinks, okay, well, you don't pay tax on overtime. Well, it's not that simple. It's Fair Labor Standards overtime is only part that you can actually get a deduction for. Mm. And so, as you may know, the fire department, police department, they may get double time for coming in off shift. They may get, time for training sessions or whatever it may be. That may or may not actually count towards their deduction for on their income taxes. And so we were able to put together some analysis, and we actually did some trainings and working with our labor and employment clients to inform them how to do it. And so a lot of them, what they've done now is they've able to now come up with processes to track the overtime, because under the law, beginning in this tax year, the W-2 of employees has to have a separate dedicated line item for what is your fair labor standards overtime and what is your deduction associated with that. So we got out ahead of that issue. And, you know, some of my communities, we've got 400 or 500 employees, City of Taylor, City of Troy. I mean, these are big communities like the City of East Lansing. And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of department heads. And so I think that we were instrumental in getting them thinking about these things, because I think a lot of people thought it was really on the employee to figure out. The law says, no, it's up to the employer to figure it out. And so that was something that we got ahead of. And I think it was very beneficial to our clients.
Got it. Thank you.
That is. I'll do two quick ones, because then by the time we get back, I think
That's
we'll see all
next
my good questions. What would be the priority for city council to understand about how you work? So I've got some experience. I retired as a police officer from the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I got 25 years, but you're gonna have a year and a half from now, we'll have a new council. What do you think is a priority for council to understand on labor law in general? I'm not, you gave the big picture, but what would be some things that you'd possibly have a training on with new council members?
With the council themselves?
New council members coming in for the first time.
Sure. So, and that's really part of my course, which is what are the foundations of labor relations in Michigan? What are the obligations of employers in Michigan in terms of good faith bargaining? What are the different types of, you know, what's a mandatory subject of bargaining versus a permissive subject of bargaining versus an illegal or prohibitive subject of bargaining? Talk about the bargaining process. You know, how does that work? You know, who starts, who goes second? How do you know you've reached an impasse? What happens if you reach an impasse? Do you go to mediation? Do you go to fact finding? You know, what are the various means that we can travel down in terms of trying to ultimately get to a deal? And so, you know, just that basic education, I think, would be so that when there's a closed session and say, hey, we're going to mediation, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, okay, yeah, John, I remember you talking. Okay, that's where we are. Okay, and tell me about that. How does that process work? So it would be more of an educational, you know, from point A to point Z in terms of how do we start? And again, that start comes from council, right? You set policy, you set the mandate, right? And then you give us direction, us in the administration directive in terms of where you want to end up. So what's the roadmap to get to the endpoint? Hopefully, somewhere in the area where you wanted to be in the first place. And so that's what we would do.
So what's an optimal contract? How long?
At least 3. Okay, at least 3 years, I think is healthy. And 4 is healthy. Because again, there's a lot of time and energy that goes into it, but there's so much value in labor peace. And as a former police officer, you know that. I think we'd rather have our employees doing the job that they were hired to do as opposed to duking it out at the bargaining table. And by duke, I mean in a friendly, professional manner.
In 25 years, I don't think I may have 1 or 2 contracts we actually settled with them.
Yeah.
So Ted, right now, just to kind of let you know that we have been all over the place, but all the different contracts have been coming due at different times.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the fire is just 1 year is because they're trying to make all the contracts come due at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have a little bit more, rather than the Me Too
Sure.
Me Too clause is a huge thing for us.
Sure.
Past. I'll defer.
Councilmember Sim.
Sure. Apparently, Mr. Whalen doesn't think you and I are gonna get reelected. Members.
Ouch.
Dang. Come on, we gotta have a little fun. Okay. Okay, so in your proposal, John, you're gonna be the lead senior attorney and then Megan, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm always impressed when I remember things I read versus when I hear them. So tell me other clients you're directly managing and how you think that's gonna fit in with taking on East Lansing as a new client for the labor practice.
So one of the benefits of the labor world is there's a lot of ebb and flow, right? A lot of the work is really driven around collective bargaining. And the clients that I represent, some are big, some are small. Not every one of them is active all the time, whereas on the municipal side of the world, there's always council meetings, there's always stuff going on. And so there is a greater challenge, I think, at the corporate general counsel level to do the balancing act, because everything's go. The labor world is different. Having said that, technology is huge, right? Being able to work, if not in person, certainly Zoom capabilities, phone call capabilities is what I can do. But I'm used to making the drive. I've made the drive up here for years. I've done it. It's not a problem. I can be very productive when I drive. And a lot of it is just scheduling and making sure that things are working on all end. And Joan, who's our legal assistant, she's been with me for 30 years. She's fabulous. She knows, she's very good with clients. She's good with setting things up. She's good at redlining. I'm a big proponent of redlining contracts, collective bargaining agreements. My goal is to have a red line contract that both the union and the city would vote on, so that we don't get into language issues after the contract has been approved. So, I almost insist on it. These, in my career, we'd have a TA sheet, you'd have these bullet points, and then you would ratify it, and the union would get their raises, and then they would disappear on you, because it's like, well, we got our raises. Not all the time. That way, then, if we have, especially when you get into things like administrative issues, operational things, things that are somewhat more complicated than wages, it's nice to have a red line contract that both sides approve, and you approve the same document. Once it's approved, Joan hits accept changes, signature version, and we're done. And we don't have to do that. So technology has really helped improve our efficiencies. Megan has come on and been fabulous in terms of working, in terms of helping me with proposals, handling interviews for investigations, helping me with training. We just got through a fairly complicated arbitration that she was assisting me on.
So does Megan handle the same client load as you? Like, she supports any client you're the lead on, or does she have her own set portfolio beyond?
No, they're basically mine.
Okay.
Yeah. Someday I think she'll have her own clientele, but she's still basically new in the industry. So, but certainly, there is the bandwidth is there, the ability to do it is there, the drive is there. And I'm never concerned about not having enough to do. And like I said, there's others in the group if we need assistance and pull in and things of that nature. But
Crazy.
Looking ahead, what are the biggest legal risks municipalities face in the areas of employment and public safety over the next 5 or 10 years? It's kind of some of the newer things that are changing and how we need to be thinking about that.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Looking ahead, what are the biggest legal risks municipalities face in the areas of employment and public safety over the next 5 to 10 years? The reason why I ask that is because we want to stay out of court. Right? It's very expensive. It's not good community relations wise. And so I'm just curious if there's any things that we need to be thinking about as a municipality going forward. Those two entities, public safety and employment.
Training is huge. Training is probably the quintessential especially from a law enforcement perspective, but just from a general employee perspective. As I said, I trained the entire DPW department on harassment and discrimination. It was a 2-day process that I handled. As I said, I trained the entire management staff here on all kinds of issues in terms of dealing with employees, confidentiality issues, things of that nature. We've done law enforcement training, excessive force training. We've done trainings on Fourth Amendment search and seizure, which is a little bit outside of the labor employment world. It's really more of a risk management, but certainly those are the kind of services that we can provide that will help us keep us out of court, help us from avoid getting sued.
I like that answer. So we just specifically talking about use of force training. is that like a one-time training you do up front, or is it an ongoing deal that you do with that, or how does that work with your training?
Well, well, I mean, it really depends on what the client wants to do, and some of our clients like more of our training, some less. It really kind of depends on the makeup of the department and what that chief or what the administration wants to do. But certainly that we're available to do that and make ourselves available. And certainly if there are updates, case all updates, and there's always cases coming out on use of force, search and seizure, those things, there's always things coming out that we provide updates on.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked, I'm not exclusively to our police department, but we do have a younger force. So
Mhm.
Statistics go to show the use of force goes up quite a bit when it comes to that. And so that's why I was asking you about the training, because I think the more training we can get, the better we can insulate ourselves from
Absolutely.
other things down the road. So I appreciate the answer.
Yeah, of course.
Mr. Rowe.
I will defer to Councilmember Singh. It sounds like she's got more questions.
I have two others, I think. Just in your proposal, in the content, you talk about a 60-day out clause, I think contract out clause versus the draft is a 30-day. So I just wanted to reconcile which one.
It's 2
You're
days, it's
proposing.
1 day, it doesn't matter. I only want to be what people want me to be, so I don't, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's really more for the benefit of the city, so that there's a longer, if we need to transition, but again, even if it was a 1 day, my transition would be as long as it takes to make sure the client is in the best position possible. Both coming into a circumstance and going out. You know, that's vital. We just took over, as I said, for the city of Troy, and that was a smooth transition in terms of the outgoing firm and us coming in. But yeah, certainly that's never a deal breaker with me. I put that in there just because that was an item that I think is important for both sides.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Grigsby, did you?
I don't have any more questions.
Yep. I was gonna ask more about the 312 piece, but I think I'm gonna actually go back to about a year ago. We had an ALJ decision on a dispute.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, because some of that has all, between the ALJ decision versus some of the pieces that have played out publicly, I'm curious if there's a suggestion in that scenario where we're still, grappling, working with our commission to, review the ordinance versus what was in the ALJ decision, and then what, of course, is referenced in the contract. So I'm curious for what you can recall through that situation, if there's any specific recommendations you would have made.
First of all, it was a very delicate situation. I understand that. From afar, I'm a big proponent of communication, and my 30,000-foot analysis of it is, and I would get calls from people who would call me offline and ask me questions because they knew about my background, and I was like, I'm not really the person to talk to, but the questioning was really more of they didn't have information, or they didn't understand the process, or they didn't understand how things transpired, where they ended up. And so, communication is key, and making sure everyone gets the same communication, I think, is very important. Gets the same message, has the same ability to ask the same questions, and has that information so that it's there. But again, you're dealing with council issues, you're dealing with the ALJ, you had the union, you had LAPOC, and I know there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity for things to get sidetracked as it winds through that process. And I know that Ann Gabbert was involved in some respects on that, because she was providing some guidance to LAPOC on that issue, which I think was beneficial. But without getting into the weeds, I really think the communication piece is really something that I would have stressed and probably would have emphasized to a point where, and even making myself part of that to make sure that they're hearing it directly from me, not letters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can write letters all day long. Most people don't know half the stuff you're writing, or they don't really comprehend, or I think direct communication, you know, presentation, communication, I think may have gone a long way. But with the understanding, it was a very complicated situation. And I understand that, so.
Yes.
So how long have you worked with the court?
So I handled, they had a kind of a sticky situation regarding the creation of a new position, and so Judge Greenwell had brought me in and had helped me assist with that. And then just recently, I received a phone call from Nicole asking if I would reconsider or consider continuing to do work for them. So I now, I have an agreement with them to provide labor and employment services. And I have a good relationship with Nicole and with the chief judge.
Great.
Yeah.
Any final comments, very briefly, we're at 6:30, so anything else we need to know?
I appreciate your time and
Okay.
consideration. And like I said, I know change is difficult. I think a fresh look at the circumstance, and, you know, I think the service will be there. I think it'll be very satisfied, certainly with my experience. You know, it's unmatched, and I think that would go a long way. So I would really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much for
Okay.
coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time doing this.
Thank you. Good seeing you again.
Thank you.
Great to meet you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great seeing you. Thanks.
Great to meet you.
Thank you, sir. Good seeing you.
Good to meet you guys. Great to meet you.
Good meeting.
Nice to meet you.
That thought flew by.
I know. That was my life in state government, every half hour, like, look, back to back to back to back.
So how's George doing?
He's good. He spent like, I don't know, 6 weeks in Florida. this summer.
Okay. He sent me these random text messages, you know, once in a while. It's just, yeah,
Same.
yeah. I'm good. I'm glad. I should reach out. It's been a long time. So. See you, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Safe travels.
Thanks.
I don't mean to have my back to you. Or do you think it's rude?
I
Would you
don't-
tell me?
No, because I don't get offended.
Okay. Fair enough.
There's too many things in this world in life to be dealing with.
With, yeah, it's small.
To sit back and say I'm offended.
I gotta, I do the same thing with how our tables are set up now. Now I'm always like this to Robert, like I'm always looking, lounging, looking down the,
You find yourself scared of it, then you wonder, oh, my.
and then every now and then I'll give him a
Everybody's
little.
sitting
Jeremy.
Yeah.
There's no difference. That's me.
I've never been here.
Hannah was all full, so,
Hi. Like a surprise.
Great day, sir.
It's like a rumor. A confirmed rumor.
Oh, that I'm.
Yeah.
it's
A
all part
confirmed
of our,
rumor.
it's part of our packet.
Did
It is.
Yeah.
I sent
Oh, not the one I printed out.
Oh,
Thank God you're here to tell me.
In the packet for tomorrow. Not tonight.
doing?
Oh, not tonight. Whatever I printed, the original proposals, I printed off. And that's what I,
So close.
I tried this, I think, maybe I did.
thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I haven't even gotten to that yet.
You did.
Some of these teams still.
Okay.
Okay,
I won't
we
feel
are,
guard.
we are in the second of the interviews. We have, Rosati Schultz here with us, who also responded to our RFP for Labor Council. And, what we'd like to ask you to do is take 5 minutes and, highlight some of the things from the proposal that you would like us to know, and highlight aspects of your firm. And then after that, we will cycle through some questions.
Okay.
So the floor is yours, or?
Okay, well, I'll just start, with very briefly, I think you're all not as familiar with our firm by this time as you can be. So I'll spare you all the details. I think you have all that. The proposal we submitted is to fold in the labor and employment under our existing contract for the existing 5-year term. So if you did award it to our firm, labor would be about
4 years and 3 months or so. So it would run concurrently with the period of that existing contract. I more recently supplied a draft. Didn't want to be presumptuous. One member of council asked for something, so I sent what would be a first amendment to the existing contract to do that, to fold it in. So it's just amending the existing contract to bring in the labor and employment. Any other questions about the firm and how we work on the labor and employment side of things, I'll leave it to the rest of the team to explain. It would all fall under that single contract though.
Anything more that you'd like to add? Introduction.
I mean, I think you all know me. I'm getting to know a couple of you, but I think most of you know me pretty well. I'm very excited. This is Jeremy Romer. He, well, you can speak a little bit about your experience, but I'm very excited to finally have like backup. As you know, even at Keller Toma, I did not have a consistent backup, so it was one of the reasons I was excited to join Rosati Schultz is that they hired Jeremy recently, and he has a very good background in labor, public sector labor, has negotiated many, many contracts. So I feel like I'm pretty responsive to all of you, but to the extent that, you know, I'm not available, Jeremy will be there as well, and we can tag team in on issues. So very excited with that.
And I can give you a little background of where I come. So
Sure.
my entire career was with the city of Dearborn. It's about 120,000 people. We had about 15 labor unions. I was the chief labor negotiator for the last 12 and fire city attorney for the last 4. So extensive amount of experience, collective bargaining, ADA, FMLA, the state court, federal court issues. So it'd be great to complement.
And I know, and Steve and Carlito can chime in a little bit. I'm still getting to know the other attorneys at the firm. But in addition to Carlito, who has an employment background, Andrea Pike is also with the firm. She has a really strong employment litigation background as well. So a lot of these issues that we deal with on a daily basis with HR and department heads are things that will be multiple attorneys available if for some reason I'm not available to answer those questions.
And we also do have Andy Brady in our Lansing office who does employment law, and I think Thomas Bendit tonight as well. Others, maybe others that do. And Thomas is also working on one of the other cases for the city right now, so you might have seen his name on some materials.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Councilmember Singh.
Sure. I used to live near the corner of Michigan and Firestone on the east side of Dearborn.
Okay.
Your current mayor is a friend. Setting all that aside, tell me, this is a little bit different because everyone is supporting the city of East Lansing, but the question is, why do you want to serve the city of East Lansing for their labor contracts?
Why do I want to? I will say, I'm not just saying this. You guys are one of my favorite clients. I'm not just
After
I really do. It's very challenging. I mean, the work here is very interesting because it's so unique. I'm not even using quotes. I'm not joking. It's very unique. It's very challenging. As an attorney, you know, when you do stuff, I've been doing this for almost 25 years, you kind of see the same things over and over again. It can become repetitive, but here there are a lot of very unique challenges, which make it interesting. I will tell you that one of the reasons I wanted to leave Ogletree and come back to the public sector is because I really enjoy working with public sector clients. I think I like sort of trying to make a difference. I'm not a political person. I don't want to run for office. I leave that to you guys. But I do like kind of being behind the scenes and helping solve these problems and, you know, kind of working towards the betterment of your community to the extent that I'm able to help on the labor and employment side. So that's one of the reasons why. I also really enjoy the people here. The clients, you know, you make a lot of connections with your clients over the years, and East Lansing has been a client of mine in one form or another for many, many years. And I've gotten to know a lot of the people here, and I really do enjoy working with them. They're very prompt, receptive, to the advice that you give. That's not true of every client. You guys are, you have a lot on your plate that you need to balance, and you always give due consideration to the advice I give, which again is not always the case with some clients. So I do appreciate that, and it makes it nice to work with those kinds of clients.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, kind of different because, I know how you work and some of the different things, but I guess looking ahead, what is the biggest legal risk to municipalities facing, employment law changes, even with the public safety over the next 5-10 years? Is there certain things that are happening in courts right now? Or certain things that are changing around the state in regards to how we need to be thinking about things? And the reason why I say that or ask this is because, I want to stay out of court, and having things come our way and paying for that, it's really expensive. So I'm just curious about if there's anything that you guys can inform me on in regards to that question.
One concern is how much politics you're going to get involved in the court, in the judicial decision-making process. I think we're seeing that right now with some of the issues that are going before the courts, and we have to monitor that and advise accordingly. Prior to the current presidential administration, there was an expansion of civil rights, let's say in the Elliott Larson Act, there was expansion of civil rights. Now we're trying to see how are the courts going to respond to that if those get challenged and things like that. So what that means is that all of us need to be talking more, monitoring, and more importantly, informing all of you about where that goes. And the problem is wherever it starts doesn't mean where it's going to end, right? With the courts, right? So you have a lot of decisions that are going to be decided at the trial court level, go to the Court of Appeal. And it all depends, like who the courts, who the judges are, how they receive it. But keeping you informed along the way, I think, is our biggest challenge because it's a lot of quick changes that are happening. It started with the executive orders, but that's just one stop. It's going to go beyond that. So I think that right now is our biggest challenge. We're trying to do our executive order monitor list and stuff, like constantly talking about that. You can always count on Steve has a list of everything. So, monitoring that stuff, and we have to communicate that. But I think that's for me, from the overall perspective about the law.
Yeah, and I'm also watching there's been some movement at the state level with minimum staffing becoming a mandatory subject of bargaining that can impact your public safety unit, which could, it's going to change the way we negotiate, especially how reciprocal it is back to avoid like an Act 312 arbitration, because typically that staffing level, the union is tough to move on, but if it's mandatory, it'll be an interesting climate to see if that becomes a mandatory subject of bargaining.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. There have been attempts in the past. They've always failed, but this one in particular seems to have a little bit more momentum behind it. Which is really concerning from the employer side because it's going to create, if you have to maintain a minimum amount of staffing and you're not there, you're gonna have to budget for it, create the positions and fill them. So that is something that I think anybody in the labor world here in Michigan is keeping an eye on. I think the other thing that is sort of still, I'm not sure what its status is currently, but PA 152, which is the public health care law, has been a subject of debate in the legislature as well. There were changes. I don't think that they affected you guys because your employees don't pay for healthcare, but if healthcare costs rise and there's a change in terms of your healthcare split with your employees, that's going to create a huge issue at bargaining. Currently, your employees don't really pay anything for healthcare. You've been lucky.
So if I can just chime in just a little bit from maybe a more practical, firm standpoint and how we, you said correctly, don't want to be sued. If we can avoid that or do things to prevent that. Part of the benefit of, Gary joining our team is that she has in the firm a lot of resources, as I've told you before. Well, last time I interviewed you, we had 25 attorneys, now we have 31, all municipal law attorneys. Every one of us have the same calling. I call it a calling. We're not big, powerful personal injury or corporate lawyers. We are lawyers who serve communities, and we have a calling to do that. And Gary came to us based on it. It's not a joke. It's very serious. We take our calling very seriously, and having that support in the office. Different ones of us might see different things happening in the law, and we're lawyers, we talk. That's what we do. We talk to each other, we compare notes, we compare things going on, and that hopefully can translate into seeing situations that might be arising in the city administration or the city generally, that we can provide some counsel on, and we try to do that in the non-employment arena as well. Maybe you've noticed some of that along the way, some things that you've heard that maybe you hadn't heard before, regarding developments in the law, so.
And I will say, like, the goal of not being sued is our goal as well, right? Like that's the place from which the advice comes, is to reduce the risk that the city will face liability or be sued. So it makes me happy to hear that we share that goal.
But if you do get sued, we
But if you
have
do
the
get sued,
resources,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
The goal is to position you in the best defensive position possible if you get sued. But we try to avoid that situation, but if we can't,
Calculated risk.
right, we put you in the best position.
So I have a follow-up question, if I may, and this is, you have to forgive me, but this is kind of the element that we deal with. So a lot of people in the community think that lawyers want to get into litigation because they make more money. And so I guess just saying that out loud, since we're in a public meeting, can you just speak to that? So maybe you can inform or educate the general perception that comes to that.
Sure. I mean, I think attorneys like us, we get paid by the hour, right? So we're gonna get paid whether you get sued or not. We have an ethical obligation to our clients to represent them zealously and within the confines of the law. So nobody here is going to advise a client in a way that's going to create a risk of liability just so that they can get sued in order to increase our billing. We bill plenty. We do plenty of work for you guys without having to get sued. And quite frankly, in this particular context, if you got sued, say, in federal court, we wouldn't be representing you anyways, right? Somebody else is going to represent you. You're seeing that happening right now. So that sort of idea that we're going to put you in a position to increase our own pocketbook and get you sued doesn't really pan out, because there's no benefit to us. In fact, it's contrary to what our ethical obligation is. So that's I think a fallacy, and I understand, there may be attorneys out there that kind of practice that way. Generally speaking, on the management side, we're not looking to create liability for you. It's not good for our business either. If you guys get sued all the time, you're gonna wonder why you're getting sued all the time, right?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's important. I hope I didn't insult anyone with that, but it's something you hear from the community members, because people don't have understanding. So I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of get that out there.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Will. I'm gonna do two parts. I'm not sure it's gonna come back down to me yet. So what's your first name again?
Jeremy.
Jeremy. Can you tell me if you have two new council members, maybe one new council member, and you had an hour with them when they first got on council, what would you talk to them about with? I rephrase the question from that side. So what would you talk about what would you want to teach a new council member that's just stepping in fresh off the street about labor law?
Sure. So the first thing I always stress with it, because I've had plenty of new councils, is the importance of the historical context, right? That matters. So before we move to change, it's important to understand where we were, where we want to go, and how to get there, right? From a labor context, there's a give and take with, I appreciate the last question because it's budget, right? A lot of times you're confined by budgets, municipalities are confined by their budgets. We need to be cognizant of that when we're litigating or doing your contracts. But I want the new council person to understand that labor negotiating, that it matters, your morale matters, your staff matters. All of that, we're on the same team at the end of the day, right? So I'd stress the importance that that is the goal at the end of the day with budgetary constraints, but how we get there, remember the history so we can move forward and be aligned. The best thing you can do as a council is be aligned.
So, other question, what, I'm not sure who would answer this. What is the industry standard as far as city attorneys about, so we've had typically separate firms. What's the industry standard? Is it typically one firm doing both? Or is it typically several different firms?
To me, I don't think there's an industry standard. I think it's a community by community basis and, I think it depends on the structure of the administration and the contact, how large an organization is, how many unions it has, what the relationship is with the unions historically, things of that nature, make it more conducive and maybe, financially better to have single unified council, communication wise and non-duplication issues are eliminated in some ways. So if it's possible and if it works for a community, it's good. So I don't think there's an industry standard because other communities, it might not work as well due to the makeup of the union and how tight, it might be a smaller community where, there's a lot of, and not as great a relationship between management and the unions, which might make it difficult. So you really have to make a judgment call. That's why originally, not knowing you, we didn't submit for labor because we didn't know you. We've gotten to know you. And
And you.
and here we are,
First
because
time.
we wouldn't be here if we didn't, and you can tell that because we didn't submit originally 6 months ago or whatever, but now we are, because we see that this, in our view, is a community and the way you're set up administratively and so on, that it'll work. That's how we kind of ended up here. I don't know if anybody
And
else has
I'll
something.
just tack on, Steve and I were talking about this earlier, that, we've really kind of here seen over the last several months that interplay between the city attorney's office and the labor attorney. I've probably talked to Carlito more in the last 3 months than I've ever talked to him before in my life. And it's, all related to issues that are coming up here. And so it's nice to kind of bounce ideas off of each other because in your community, again, going back to you guys have some unique issues, he comes from a perspective that maybe I'm not quite seeing. I'm coming from a perspective that he's not quite seeing. And so together we are problem solving for you guys, kind of very globally, right? Not just looking at the labor issue or not just looking at, the city attorney type issues, but looking at and I think being in the same firm makes it a little bit more cohesive, right? No one's going to step on each other's toes. We're going to be collaborating because we're colleagues and we work together.
Thank you.
It works, so it's working. In the time we've been here, developing relationships with all of you, and then building this relationship. Professionally, we've known each other for a long time. I think Steve and I are telling the truth when I say this is a big addition to our firm. And part of the reason is because it works, right? It works here, and it's a transition that will be fluid and that can move smoothly. But going to that, yes, it is nice having someone similar experience, similar backgrounds, dealing with the same issues, and then yet still getting a new insight on that. It's a nice team, especially the other individuals that are involved in the firm as well too in these issues. And it's nice. And Jeremy as well too, and his depth of knowledge he has from dealing with a large community, a diverse community with several issues that they have to deal with. That is rare to get, right? So Steve and I are very happy to the addition to this firm about this, but it not only benefits us, it tremendously benefits our clients. And if I could just say, about the question, follow up on that. We're about long-term relationships, right? We're about long-term relationships. Unfortunately, there are lawyers out there that just want to throw everything, bill out of the file as much as they can, right? That's not how we do it, and that's how we never will do. We're about building long terms. I pride myself that we have 30-year clients with our firm. I've been there 25. They were there before I started. They're still there now. I know I had something to do with that. Same thing with Steve and these two as well joining as well. So we're about the long term. So whatever short-term gain you might get from making money, that's not for us in the long term. And I think our reputation is built upon that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And by the way, Jeremy comes to us from a community that had, you handle both union and general counsel.
Yeah, it was the
I
city
mean,
attorney and the labor code at
yeah.
the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, So it was in-house, it was all in, and I thought that flowed very nicely. It gets everybody on the same page. I think that cohesiveness that I spoke to is very important between the administration and the council when we're talking about issues that affect all of your city staff. Right, so I think that's very important, and it often cuts down on duplication.
So,
Sure, well, I just, I guess for the record, there's a couple of questions I already heard responses to through the dialogue thus far. One is talking about how between Gary and Jeremy, you would manage kind of the engagement, with our contracts and any other labor issues. You're talking about the efficiencies that are gained by having one firm servicing multiple aspects of the work. So I just want to say I heard answers to those two things. One question I have, recognizing something specific to East Lansing with our ALJ decision last year and the interplay, which, has been referenced between, our police oversight ordinance, our contract negotiations. I'm just curious if there's when you reflect back, is there anything that you learned along the way that you would recommend to us?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one I've been thinking about as we, there's been so much, I don't want to use the word conflict or drama, but there's been a lot of pushback, in the last few months. And there was initially pushback after the contract was negotiated. And I do think that my primary job is to advise you guys on the labor, right? The labor law, the implications of that. And I sort of leave it to you ultimately to balance these other competing interests in terms of community transparency, accountability, those things. But I do think that there's room within the advice to also take those into account. It's something I've been learning as we've gone along these last several months. Going to the LEPOC meeting last month was very helpful in that regard. And I think it gave me some insight that I didn't necessarily have before in terms of what mindset maybe we should be bringing to the table when we negotiate with the police. We can't have LEPOC be part of the bargaining team. It's not appropriate. We can't really have them provide insight directly to the bargaining team. But I did encourage them to bring their concerns to council so that council is informed of those concerns and that they inform the bargaining position we take when we go into labor negotiations. And I do think that that's a valuable approach to take with this particular issue, because as I've said before, we are definitely going to get proposals on it. And I think last time we bargained and they were in the dark and they had no voice. And giving them a voice is we got to be careful how we do it, right? But I think that there's a way for them to come to council and for those concerns to filter down into our bargaining position. And it's what I encourage them to do. And, to the extent you have relationships with them, I think it's important that happens, right? That we hear, these are the things that are really important to us. We can't always control how bargaining goes. As you know, we engaged in a risk analysis last time and reached a conclusion and ended up with the contract we ended up. And we may end up doing something similar here. We don't know yet. But I think a lot of the hard feelings stemmed from the fact that they were left out of that process completely. And I think that we could certainly do something a little bit better this time around to prevent that, or at least reduce that.
I don't think I really have. I learned from the last 30 interviews, it's kind of a bad question because it's not really a good thing, but try to sum it up a little bit better. So, on council, we have different opinions about things and how things should go. And sometimes one may think this way and one may think the other way. From your experience, how do you navigate through that to get us all on the same page for what's best for the city? Is that a clear question?
It's a good question. I mean, it's the reality, I think, of working with a client that's made up of multiple people, right? And multiple perspectives and that. So, I mean, my approach, and I'll let everyone else join in, is I try to be as objective as possible with the advice I give, right? I will lay out for you what the problem is, what I think the solution is. I think you've probably seen this when I talk to you guys, and this is my recommendation. And, you know, it ultimately, I don't know necessarily that it's my job to convince you, right, to accept what I'm telling you. It's my job to make sure that you are fully informed of what the legal risks are, legal benefits are of a proposed course of action. And so that's typically how I sort of approach when there's diverse sort of opinions amongst the body, is just give it to you as straight and objectively as I possibly can, and lay out risks. If you're wanting to do something and the mayor's wanting to do something else, I will lay out the risks for both proposed courses of action and kind of hopefully guide you to the right decision, or at least what I think is the right decision. But ultimately, you know, I let you guys kind of walk yourselves through that. And I've never found, at least with this body, that your differences prevent you from sort of accepting the legal advice and following the legal advice. I think everyone, you know, works very well together in that regard.
Yeah, I would agree with 100%, even though we may not agree. I think we have a very great relationship, working relationship, in coming to a conclusion that we all think is best for the city. But yeah, anyone else want to add to that at all?
Is honest with you about the law too, you know, if you want something, you ask about something, we're gonna tell you, start with the law, right? Start with the law, and then listen and see what your take is, where you want to go with something. But then I'm also going to give you candid answers in return, right? So if you want something that's, again, that's not consistent where the law is at, we'll tell you, right? And tell you the risks if you want to move forward that fight. Because as Gary said, ultimately the decision's up to you guys, but at least you'll know from us what your chances are, right? And we're going to give you answers that you can understand, and that we'll all understand that we're on the same page when we leave, that, you know, that this course of action might not be the greatest, but it could be worth the fight, right? At least we're advised of all the options. And I think that's what we're supposed to do as your council, and, you know, in this role that we serve. If it's a pure advocacy role, that's a little bit different, you know, and we go that way. We're in the pure litigation there, then I'll flip sometimes and go in there.
Okay.
But in this role, guiding you, advising you, we have to give you clear-cut advice based upon how we understand the law.
Thank you.
So we are just a hair after 7 o'clock. Is there anything in final comments that you'd like us to know about your proposal? Everything we maybe haven't covered? Would be important for us. I think so. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming in. So that concludes item number 2, discussion of City Council's interview of two law firms, responding to the city's labor and employment law services request for proposals. I think we can take a brief recess and then we'll return in a few minutes and we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. Okay, we are back in session from a brief recess. The next item on our agenda concerns a closed session. Is there a motion concerning item 3.1? Let me read that.
I'll make a motion. Okay. A closed session to discuss consult with city attorneys regarding privilege, confidential attorney-client legal correspondence that is exempt from disclosure by state law as allowed under subsection 81H of Michigan Open Meetings Act.
Okay, a motion by Grigsby, second by Whalen. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meadows?
Here. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Councilmember Whalen?
Yes.
Councilmember Singh?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grigsby?
Yes.
Mayor Altman?
Yes. Okay, we are closed session.
Go
Are we live? All right. We are going to open session, which brings us
Do we have to take a motion?
No.
No.
to go to open session.
To leave,
No.
no, okay.
Declare it closed.
So we are returning to open session. Item 4.1, upon return to open session, city council may take action on matters discussed in closed session. Are there any motions?
Yes, Mayor, I have a motion to make. I move to direct the city attorneys to proceed in the manner recommended by the city attorneys in their attorney-client communication and as presented in closed session, including, but without limitation, issuing an attorney-client privilege written communication to the Human Rights Commission regarding its handling of the complaints submitted by Mr. Smith and Mr. Woods, and to request that the HRC enter into a closed session to review and discuss the attorney's legal correspondence and advice.
Motion by Meadows, second by
Second.
Whalen. Any discussion of the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And the city attorney is so directed. Which brings us to item number 5, communications from the audience. Is there any audience to communicate?
No.
Seeing no audience to
Well,
communicate.
there's one audience member that's in here. If the audience member wants to communicate, you can unmute yourself. Oh, It looks good to me.
All right, and no communications from the audience. We're at item 6, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Sting, second by Whalen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Productive.